Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes, where I'm taking another set of your questions. If you're enjoying these, please do hit like and subscribe. This message is from Nancy, who's asking about the famous and ultimately iconic music stars you've met during your time. You have mentioned Elton John, and of course, Merle Haggard was on the show. Who else did you run into, engage with during that fabulous time and after? There weren't a lot of, big music people on our show because it wasn't that kind of a show. So, but behind the scenes, of course, Elton John having come to visit the set, that was how we got to interact. And he came into the Waltons schoolroom, like our real schoolroom where we were in school, and chatted with us for, 20, 30 minutes, which was just such a treat. I think we were all kind of getting a little starstruck there. Some of the other people that occurred to me, I did an off-road race one time, like with Jeep's off-road race at the LA Coliseum. It was something they did a couple of times. And in the one that I did, some of the music people who were involved were Vicky Carr, who I kind of became friends with. And I remember talking to her one time about, because I was still dealing with like all the nerves of singing. And I said, how long did it take you to get over being nervous? And she said, I'm still nervous every time I'm going to go and perform. So that was interesting to me to hear. And so I didn't feel so bad about still feeling nervous, like there was some sort of, when I really get comfortable, I'll know I've made it. And so that was interesting. Ted Nugent, who I didn't really get to interact with particularly, but he was cool. Charlie Pride and Lou Rawls. And again, it was just more, you're doing an event together, so you chit chat a bit, but we were talking more about the race and what we were doing there. And actors and performers are often really have a good time when they get to do something they don't normally do. This is when we can geek out a bit about some of these things. So that was fun. So I briefly met them. Vicky Carr was the only one that I continued to have some interaction with after that. Also, because I did various different celebrity tennis and golf tournaments, I met various different people at some of those. I got to meet Kenny Rogers a couple of times. He would have an event in Las Vegas, and then he would perform, because he was doing a show. So we'd all get to go see his show at whatever casino he was performing at. So that was nice. And he was very nice. He enjoyed tennis. Of course, I'm meeting him under social circumstances. So I wouldn't say I got to know how they were away from the social setting particularly. They didn't confide anything into me. And I also met the Captain and Tennille. And I remember going to their house one time and playing tennis with Tony Tennille, and that was fun. So we met at a couple tournaments. And then I also knew a little better Chick Corea, and I know Stanley Clark. So I first met them back in Washington, D.C. when I was doing some publicity stuff, and Chick and I did some shows together, and then I got to go out and see when he and Stanley were playing together. They were doing a concert, and I got to go and see their concert. But I knew Chick over the years and would cross paths with him and his wife. And so he was somebody that I knew a little bit more, got to go to one of his album launch parties. And when I was performing in Canada one time doing a show, and he was coming into Calgary to do a show, and I knew his manager. And so I contacted his manager and said, hey, I'm going to come see the concert. And I did. And that was when he was with his, I think, electric band. And so that was really cool. It was in this cool sort of opera house, and that was a fun setting to see a concert. And Stanley I still cross paths with now and then, and he's really sweet. Other people, Tom Jones, I met doing some sort of a benefit, and then he said, if you're in Vegas, come see my show, and I did. So I went and saw his show when I was in Vegas, and went backstage and said hello. Barry White, I met at an awards show. We were both presenters at some music awards. And so just, again, these are people that I would meet in passing. Isaac Hayes, I originally met doing a show called Dance Fever, where we were both celebrity judges. And then at this awards show, he happened to be sitting at a table behind me, and I thought, oh, I'm not going to say anything. He won't remember me. And he came and tapped on my shoulder and went, Judy, Isaac Hayes, we met doing Dance Fever. So I was really touched that he remembered. And then I lived down in Atlanta for a while, and we would bump into each other at the same sort of neighborhood gym. And so that was fun. And I knew him over the years until his passing, and I was actually at one of his memorials. It was nice to be able to be there to sort of say goodbye. Jimmy Messina, again, tennis tournaments, and we conversed and, swapped phone calls and stuff for a period of time. So I would see him from time to time. That was after he and Loggins and Kenny Loggins had, were doing solo acts. And then again, tennis tournaments. I met Marilyn McCoo and Billy Davis Jr. at a tournament in Arkansas. And so we were at those a couple times, and then they were part of the remakes of like the Homecoming. And so when I went to that screening, they were there. And so it was nice to kind of just touch base with them again. They're really, really nice people, just so genuine and down to earth. So that was really nice. Gloria Gaynor was also at that tournament. So just, again, met her in passing. So those are some of the music people that come to mind that I have had the opportunity to meet at times. And I still, when I meet people whose work, whether it's music or film or television, if I'm familiar with them, I admire them. And it's great to have an opportunity to just, say hello and get to meet them. And, I can be just as much of a fan. A question here from Kathy Bella Rose, who said, exactly what clauses are in the actor's contract? Clauses. Well, it's hard to say. I mean, there's a lot of things from what's expected of the actor, what role they're playing, what they're going to be paid, what the expectations are that the company has basically all the rights to the performance. It might include obligations relative to promoting the show. Sometimes there's clauses that restrict things that you can do. Sometimes it might restrict external activities where you could get injured, and it might impact production if you were injured. Otherwise, it's a lot of legalese. And they do go through them and make sure that there's nothing that doesn't make sense. So, and each contracts can have little variations on them. So it is important that they're read through to make sure that you're not agreeing to something that just is beyond what it should be or beyond something that you're comfortable with. And then you said, what does the boom operator do? Well, that is the person who holds, it's a long pole with a microphone on the end of it, and that's the boom operator. They basically are responsible for making sure that microphone picks up good sound on the actor's dialogue and anything that's going on. So they will position that so that it tries to stay within a relative distance from the actor, but keeping it out of camera frame and moving when actors move and all that kind of stuff. So that's the boom operator. How does an actor know their mark in a scene? Well, that will be set up during rehearsals. So once the director places the actors, then the second assistant camera person will come with what looks like usually a little T, and they will put that at where your toes are. If it's going to show in the scene, then they might put just a tiny little piece of tape, or if you're outside, they might put a little twig or something that's your mark. So you rehearse through that, you know where you are, you know who you're standing next to, you've blocked it out, you rehearse it a few times, and that's your mark. How does the director establish the type of lighting used to make the scene more dramatic? That really falls more to the cinematographer. So in a show like ours, where there was a certain style to the show, then that was sort of established. So then it's more a question of, is it daytime? Is it nighttime? Is it moodier? So those are things that would potentially be discussed in pre-production. If there was something that the director wanted, but usually you're going to stay stylistically within what's been established for a show. In a movie, There's going to be more conversations in advance about the look of the show, what kind of lenses they're going to use, what's the tone of the film, what ultimately do they want the coloring sort of to be. Some shows are more saturated in color, so they might light them differently if that's the plan, or if they want it a little more muted and it's going to be a little grayer or something like that, a little blue and gray, then that's going to change how they light it. So, but ultimately it comes down to the cinematographer and his lighting crew and him determining where those lights are going to be placed and how they're going to create shadows or non-shadows in different places within the set. And then, how in the world do actors learn all the lines in the script? Wow. Different people have different methods of how they learn lines. And, I started learning lines when I was just a kid. So I found my way, and different people have different ways they do it. But it's just practice and repetition. And it's like a muscle. If you exercise it enough, you get better at it. So, and then, is it a standard universal contract, or can the actor add more features to it for their benefit? Certainly, you'll discuss that with your agent about what they think they're going to ask for beyond. I mean, there's basic things it's going to cover, like for film and television, it's going to, or in even theater, it's going to cover how much you're getting paid and what your billing is, so what kind of credit you're getting, whether it's in film and television, whether it's going to happen at the beginning or the end of the film or both. And then sometimes with the bigger leads, what position are you? First position or your second position? Sometimes you'll see them where if there's two sort of stars, they'll put them side by side, or they'll put one higher and one lower, but they'll put the higher one on one side and the lower one. So different things. And then sometimes you'll see special things like, and featuring or with special guest star or things like that, which are sort of an additional way to call attention to a particular actor. So there's things like that. And so billing will be part of that, those contracts. If there's transportation involved, are you negotiating to be driven to the set? Are you negotiating a particular type of trailer as a dressing room? There's different little features. So you can certainly ask for a lot of things, and those can be negotiating points, and there might be things you ask for that you figure you're going to concede those because of others that are more important. But you'll ask for as many things as they might give you, and then give up the ones that aren't important. And that's what I have for this segment of Behind the Scenes. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be back with more of your questions in the future. Thanks for watching.